Highly intelligent people don't walk around feeling smart. They doubt themselves. They overthink. They assume others know more than they do. And psychology shows this self-doubt is often the proof of intelligence. Here are 50 traits of highly intelligent people who constantly underestimate themselves. Chapter 1. How they think. Let's start with how intelligent people process information differently. Their minds work in ways that create doubt, even when that thinking is actually brilliant. First, they question their own conclusions immediately. The moment they form an opinion, they start poking holes in it. While others settle on an answer and move on with their day, their mind is already asking, "But what if I'm wrong?" This isn't insecurity. It's intellectual honesty taken to an extreme. They've learned that first answers are often incomplete, so they automatically challenge themselves. The problem is, this makes them feel uncertain about everything, even when they're right. They watch other people state opinions with confidence and wonder why they can't do the same. What they don't realize is that those confident people simply aren't considering all the angles. The intelligent person's doubt comes from seeing more of the picture, not less. Second, they see multiple explanations for everything. A simple situation becomes a puzzle with 10 possible solutions. Someone cancels plans, and while most people think they're busy, the intelligent mind generates scenarios. Maybe they're upset. Maybe something happened. Maybe they're avoiding conflict. Maybe they just forgot. They can't just pick one perspective because they genuinely see the validity in many. This makes decision-making exhausting. It makes forming opinions feel impossible. And it makes them feel indecisive when they're actually just thorough. They're not confused. They're comprehensive. But it feels like confusion because everyone else seems so sure. Third, they struggle to feel certain. Confidence feels unreachable because they're always aware of what they don't know. When someone asks their opinion, there's a mental list of caveats that comes with it. Well, based on what I know and assuming these factors, and if this information is correct, then maybe. Certainty feels like ignoring information. It feels irresponsible. So they stay in a state of permanent maybe, which others interpret as weakness or lack of knowledge. But it's actually the opposite. They know enough to know how much they don't know. That's called wisdom, but it feels like inadequacy. Fourth, they overanalyze simple decisions. Choosing a restaurant or replying to a text becomes a mental marathon. They consider angles that don't need considering. Should I suggest Italian, or will they think I'm being pushy? If I reply too fast, will I seem desperate? If I wait too long, will they think I don't care? What most people do on autopilot becomes a strategic operation. This isn't anxiety exactly. It's their brain doing what it does best, processing variables. But it makes everyday life harder than it needs to be. They watch people make quick decisions and wonder what's wrong with themselves. Nothing is wrong. Their processor is just running more programs. Fifth, they replay conversations in their head. Hours after talking to someone, they're still analyzing what was said, what they said, and what it all meant. Did that comment land wrong? Should I have explained it differently? Did they understand what I actually meant? They dissect tone, word choice, timing, and subtext like they're studying for an exam. Most people have a conversation and forget it. Intelligent people have a conversation and then have it again in their mind, looking for what they missed, what they could have done better, what the other person really meant. This can feel obsessive. It can feel like social anxiety. But really, it's pattern recognition and deep processing. They're learning and adjusting constantly. The cost is peace of mind. Sixth, they notice flaws others ignore. In movies, arguments, systems, or ideas, they catch the plot holes, the logical gaps, the things that don't quite add up. Everyone's enjoying the story and they're thinking, wait, but that doesn't make sense because... They see the inconsistency in someone's logic during a debate. They spot the assumption that hasn't been questioned. They notice when a process at work is inefficient. This is valuable. This is how progress happens. But it also makes them feel like they're ruining things, like they're being negative or overly critical. So they stay quiet. They let the flaw slide. And then they feel frustrated because they saw it coming and no one listened. Intelligence becomes lonely when you're the only one seeing the cracks. Seventh, they think in what-ifs. Their mind constantly runs scenarios. What if this goes wrong? What if I miss something? What if there's a better way? This is preparation. This is risk assessment. This is creative problem solving, but it feels like worry. It feels like they can't just enjoy the present moment because their brain is already 3 steps ahead, mapping possibilities. Someone announces a plan, and while everyone else is excited, they're thinking about contingencies. Not because they want to be negative, but because their mind automatically does this. It's pattern projection. It's how they navigate complexity. But socially, it makes them seem like the person who always finds problems. Internally, it makes them feel like they overthink everything. Eighth, they feel uncomfortable with absolute answers. Black and white thinking feels wrong to them. They live in the gray area where nuance exists. When someone asks, "Is this good or bad?" they want to say, "It depends." When a topic is presented as either or, they see the third, fourth, and fifth options. This is sophisticated thinking. This is how you avoid dogma and bias. But in a world that loves simple answers, it makes them feel wishy-washy. It makes them feel like they can't commit to a position. And when they do try to explain the nuance, people's eyes glaze over. So they learn to just pick a side for simplicity's sake, even though internally they know it's more complicated. Their intelligence forces them to live with complexity that others don't see. Ninth, they change opinions when new evidence appears. They're not stubborn about being right. If something makes more sense, they shift. This is intellectual integrity. This is growth. But it makes them feel inconsistent. They remember believing one thing last year and something different now, and it feels like they're unreliable. They watch people hold the same opinions for decades and wonder if that's strength. It's not. That's rigidity. But changing your mind feels like proof you were wrong before, which feeds the doubt. What they don't realize is that changing your mind is proof you're learning. Static opinions are a red flag, not a virtue. But their flexibility makes them question if they ever really know anything. 10th, they confuse depth with confusion. Because their thinking is layered, they assume they're overthinking or missing something obvious. When they try to explain their thought process, it comes out complicated. So they think, "I'm making this too hard," when actually, the topic is just that complex. They don't realize depth is the point. They think clarity means simplicity, so when their understanding is sophisticated, they assume they're doing it wrong. Someone else gives a surface-level answer with confidence, and they think, "Why can't I just think like that?" But thinking like that would mean thinking less. Their depth isn't a bug, it's the feature. But it feels like a burden because simplicity is rewarded and complexity is exhausting. Chapter 2. How they feel. Now let's talk about their emotional world, because intelligence isn't just thoughts. It's feelings too. And for people who doubt themselves, emotions become another layer of complexity to navigate. They feel intellectually behind others. Even when they know more, they assume everyone else is smarter. Intelligence feels normal to them, so they don't recognize it in themselves. They're in a room full of people, and while others are confidently contributing, they're thinking, "Everyone here probably knows this already." They don't hear the voice in other people's heads, so they assume those people feel certain. What they're experiencing is called the Dunning-Kruger effect in reverse. Less knowledgeable people overestimate their abilities. More knowledgeable people underestimate theirs. The intelligent person knows enough to see the gaps in their knowledge, while the average person doesn't know enough to realize what they're missing. So the smart person feels dumb, and the average person feels smart. It's a cruel irony, and it makes them constantly feel like they're playing catch-up to people who are actually behind them. They experience impostor syndrome constantly. That voice saying, "You don't belong here," or "You got lucky," follows them everywhere, even in their achievements. They get the promotion, and they think it's because the boss likes them, not because they earned it. They receive an award, and they think it's a mistake. Someone praises their work, and they think they clearly didn't look close enough. This isn't humility. This is a genuine belief that they've somehow tricked people into thinking they're competent. They live in fear of being found out, of someone asking a question they can't answer, of the moment when everyone realizes they're not actually that smart. What they don't see is that everyone feels this sometimes. But for intelligent people, the feeling is amplified because they're more aware of what they don't know. Imposter syndrome is often a sign that you're exactly where you should be, but it doesn't feel that way. They underestimate their abilities regularly. Tasks they complete well feel easy to them, so they assume anyone could do it. They don't see their own skill. They solve a problem at work and they think that was obvious. They write something insightful and they think, "I'm sure someone said this before." They help a friend with advice and they think that's just common sense. But it's not obvious. It's not common. It's their intelligence making difficult things look easy. This is why they're shocked when people praise them. From their perspective, they didn't do anything special. What they don't realize is that their baseline is higher than most people's peak. The things that come naturally to them are things others struggle with, but because it's effortless for them, they devalue it. Skill that feels easy gets dismissed as not being skill at all. They feel anxious before speaking up. In meetings, classes, or conversations, there's a hesitation, a fear of saying something wrong or sounding stupid. They've thought about the topic deeply, they have something valuable to contribute, but there's a moment of paralysis. What if I'm wrong? What if someone already said this? What if this sounds basic to everyone else? So they stay quiet, and someone else says a version of what they were thinking, and they feel relief mixed with regret. Relief that they didn't embarrass themselves. Regret that they didn't speak up. This cycle repeats in every group setting. Meanwhile, less thoughtful people speak without hesitation because they haven't considered all the ways they could be wrong. Confidence isn't a measure of correctness. Often, it's a measure of how little you've thought about it. The intelligent person's anxiety is their brain protecting them from looking foolish, but in doing so, it silences valuable contributions. They fear being exposed as not enough. Deep down, there's a worry that people will discover they're not as capable as they seem, that the mask will slip. They're performing competence, and they're terrified someone will see through it. This fear drives them to overprepare, to double-check everything, to rehearse conversations. They can't relax into their abilities because they don't fully believe in them. Every success feels temporary. Every compliment feels fragile. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when someone says, "Actually, you're not that smart." And because they're waiting for it, they interpret normal criticism as confirmation. A small mistake becomes proof. A piece of feedback becomes evidence. They're building a case against themselves, using their own intelligence to prosecute their worth. And the verdict is always the same: not enough. They're sensitive to criticism, not because they're fragile, but because they take feedback seriously. They analyze it, internalize it, and use it to confirm their doubts. Someone makes an offhand comment about their work, and they remember it for months. They replay it. They dissect it. They adjust their entire approach because of it. Most people hear criticism, feel defensive, and move on. Intelligent people hear criticism and build it into their self-concept. They don't dismiss feedback as the other person being harsh or wrong. They assume the criticism is valid and they missed something. This makes them excellent at growth. It also makes them vulnerable to being hurt by careless words. People don't realize how much weight their comments carry with someone who actually listens. One critical remark can undo 10 compliments in the mind of someone who's already doubting themselves. They internalize small mistakes. A minor error becomes evidence of incompetence. They send an email with a typo and they think, "I'm so careless." They forget a meeting and they think, "I can't be trusted." They misunderstand something and they think, "I'm not as smart as people think." These moments stick with them. They remember every time they got something wrong, every time they looked foolish, every time they disappointed someone. Meanwhile, they forget or dismiss the hundreds of times they got it right. This is negativity bias amplified by self-doubt. The brain remembers mistakes because they're useful for learning. But when you're already doubting yourself, mistakes become confirmation instead of just data. They stop being lessons and start being identity. And the more intelligent you are, the higher your standards, so even tiny errors feel massive. They feel guilt for not knowing everything. There's a strange pressure they put on themselves to have all the answers, to be prepared for every question. When someone asks them something and they don't know, there's shame. Like they failed somehow. Like they should have studied harder, read more, been better prepared. This is unrealistic, of course. No one knows everything. But intelligent people feel like they should come close. They feel like if they were truly smart, they'd know this already. So every gap in knowledge feels like a personal failing. They apologize for not knowing. They feel embarrassed. They rush to research it later so they'll be ready next time. They're holding themselves to an impossible standard, and every time they fall short, it reinforces the belief that they're not actually that intelligent. Knowledge becomes a burden instead of a journey. They confuse humility with incompetence. Because they don't brag or act superior, they think they must not be that smart. They see arrogant people and think that's what intelligence looks like. loud, certain, dominant. So when they're quiet, uncertain, and humble, they interpret it as proof they're not in that category. But humility isn't lack of intelligence. Often, it's a sign of it. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. That's called the Socratic paradox, and it's been true for thousands of years. Arrogance is often ignorance wearing a costume. Real intelligence is usually quiet because it doesn't need to prove itself. But when you're doubting yourself, you don't see it that way. You see your humility as weakness, your uncertainty as incompetence, your quietness as proof you don't belong. They feel misunderstood often. Their thoughts are complex, their feelings are layered, and translating that to others feels impossible sometimes. They try to explain what they mean and it comes out wrong. They try to share how they feel and people simplify it. You're just overthinking. You're being too hard on yourself. Just be confident. These responses miss the point entirely. It's not that simple, but they can't explain why without sounding defensive or complicated, so they stop trying. They keep the depth to themselves. They smile and nod when people give surface-level advice. And they feel more alone because no one really gets what's happening in their head. Being intelligent and self-doubting is isolating. You're too complex for simple answers, but explaining the complexity makes you feel like a burden, so you carry it quietly. Chapter 3: How they communicate. Communication reveals intelligence, but it also reveals doubt. Here's how they talk, and why every conversation becomes another opportunity to question themselves. They say, "I might be wrong" often. It's not false modesty. They genuinely believe they could be missing something, so they leave room for correction. When they share an idea, it comes with disclaimers. "I think, but I'm not sure. This might not be right, but correct me if I'm wrong." They're protecting themselves from being definitively wrong by acknowledging uncertainty up front. This is intellectually honest. It shows they're open to being corrected. But socially, it undermines their credibility. People hear the uncertainty and assume lack of knowledge. They don't realize it's the opposite. The person saying, "I might be wrong," has usually thought about it more than the person saying, "I'm definitely right." But confidence is persuasive, even when it's unearned. So the intelligent person's caution makes them sound less authoritative, even when they're more informed. They downplay their intelligence. If someone compliments their thinking, they deflect. "Oh, it's not that deep," or "anyone could figure that out." They're uncomfortable being seen as smart because they don't feel smart. Praise creates cognitive dissonance. Someone is seeing them differently than they see themselves, and instead of adjusting their self-image, they adjust the compliment. They explain it away. "I just got lucky. I read about it somewhere. It's really not a big deal." This becomes a habit. Every achievement gets minimized. Every success gets attributed to external factors. Over time, this reinforces the doubt. If you constantly tell yourself and others that you're not that smart, you start to believe it, even when evidence suggests otherwise. They're not fishing for more compliments. They genuinely don't believe they deserve the ones they're getting. They ask more questions than they answer. Curiosity drives them, but also uncertainty. They'd rather learn than assert. In conversations, they're the ones asking, "What do you think?" Or "How does that work?" Or "Why did you choose that?" This makes them great listeners. It makes them easy to talk to. But it also makes them feel like they're not contributing, like they're taking more than they're giving. They notice that other people make statements while they ask questions, and they wonder if that means those people know more. It doesn't. Often, questions are a sign of deeper thinking. Statements are easy. Questions require you to see what's missing. But in a culture that values having answers, asking questions can feel like admitting you don't know. So they feel less intelligent for doing the exact thing that demonstrates intelligence. They explain things carefully to avoid being wrong. Their explanations are detailed, nuanced, and full of disclaimers because they don't want to mislead anyone. If someone asks them to explain a concept, they don't give a quick answer. They give context. They give caveats. They give the full picture. "Well, generally it works like this, but there are exceptions, and depending on the situation, it might be different." This is thorough. This is accurate. But it's also exhausting for the listener. People want simple answers. They want the headline, not the article. So when the intelligent person gives the complete explanation, eyes glaze over. People lose interest. And the intelligent person notices this and thinks, "I'm bad at explaining things." They're not. They're just explaining at a depth that matches their understanding, and most people don't need or want that level of detail. but they feel like they're failing at communication. They hesitate before sharing ideas. There's a pause before they speak. They're running through whether this thought is worth saying, whether it's been said before, whether it's right. In meetings, this means someone else often speaks first. In conversations, it means they miss the moment. By the time they've decided their idea is worth sharing, the topic has moved on. So they stay quiet and later they think, I should have said something. This hesitation isn't shyness. It's quality control. Their brain is filtering for value, for accuracy, for relevance. But the delay costs them. It makes them seem passive. It makes them feel like they're not quick enough. Meanwhile, people who speak without thinking get credit for participation, even if what they said wasn't particularly insightful. Speed is rewarded over depth, and the intelligent person loses out because they're optimizing for the wrong variable. They feel others articulate better than them. Someone else says something similar and suddenly it sounds smarter, clearer, better. They assume they lack communication skills. They hear someone explain a concept they understand, and they think, why can't I say it like that? What they don't realize is that the other person might be explaining it more simply, not more accurately. Simplicity sounds confident. Complexity sounds confused, but simplicity often leaves things out. The intelligent person's version includes nuance that the simple version misses. They're not worse at communicating. They're communicating something more complicated. But when the audience prefers simple, they feel inadequate. They start to believe they can't express themselves well, when really, they're just expressing more than others are willing to receive. They prefer listening over talking, not because they're shy necessarily, but because listening feels safer and more valuable than risking being wrong out loud. When they listen, they learn. When they talk, they expose themselves to judgment, so they default to observer mode. They absorb, they process, they think, and they stay quiet. This makes them excellent friends and colleagues. People feel heard around them, but it also makes them invisible. Their ideas stay in their head. Their insights go unshared. And over time, they become known as the quiet one, the listener, the person who doesn't contribute much. This isn't true. They're contributing internally. They're processing everything. But because it's not visible, it doesn't count. And they start to wonder if they actually have anything worth saying, when in reality, they're just protecting themselves from the vulnerability of being heard. They struggle to summarize complex thoughts. Their ideas have layers and condensing them feels like losing the truth, but they worry that makes them sound unclear. Someone asks, what do you think about this? And they don't have a one-sentence answer. They have a 5-paragraph answer with subsections and footnotes, but they know people don't want that. So they try to summarize and it comes out awkward. It's complicated, or I'm not sure how to explain it briefly. This frustrates them. They feel like if they were truly intelligent, they'd be able to simplify it. But some things are actually complex. Some ideas resist summarization. Trying to force complexity into simplicity doesn't make you smart. It makes you reductive. But the pressure to give quick, clear answers makes them feel like their thinking is messy when it's actually just sophisticated. They assume others already know what they know. They don't realize their perspective is unique. They think their insights are obvious, so they stay quiet. They solve a problem and think everyone probably thought of this already. They have an observation and think this is probably common knowledge. So they don't share. And then someone else voices a similar thought, and everyone reacts like it's brilliant, and they think, wait, people didn't know that? This is called the curse of knowledge. Once you understand something, it's hard to remember what it's like not to understand it. Everything feels obvious in hindsight. So intelligent people assume their insights are universal when they're actually rare. This robs them of credit. It robs the world of their ideas, and it reinforces the belief that they're not offering anything special. They feel awkward explaining their insights. When they do share something deep, it feels uncomfortable, like they're showing off or overcomplicating things. There's a social anxiety around appearing too analytical, too serious, too intense, so they laugh it off. I'm probably overthinking this. Ignore me, I'm being weird. They apologize for their own depth. They make themselves smaller to fit the room. And every time they do this, they learn that their insights aren't welcome. That thinking deeply is something to hide, not share. So they save it for private moments, for journals and late-night thoughts. And they feel lonely because the parts of them they value most are the parts they've learned to keep hidden. Intelligence becomes something they carry alone. Chapter 4. How they work. Work reveals character. And for intelligent people who doubt themselves, work is where perfectionism lives, where standards become impossible, where achievement never feels like enough. They delay finishing work due to perfectionism. It's never quite ready. There's always one more thing to fix, one more edit to make, one more check to run. They know the deadline is approaching, but submitting feels premature, like they're turning in something unfinished. So they tinker, they adjust, they refine. And even when they finally submit, there's a list in their head of things they wish they'd done differently. This isn't procrastination. It's pursuit of a standard that doesn't exist. Perfect is impossible, but their brain hasn't accepted that. So they chase it anyway, exhausting themselves in the process. Meanwhile, people who aim for good enough finish faster and stress less. But the intelligent person can't lower the bar. It feels like giving up. So they stay in a perpetual state of almost done, never satisfied, always finding flaws. They feel their work is never ready. Even when deadlines force them to submit, there's a gnawing feeling that it's incomplete or flawed. They hit send on an email and immediately think of a better way to phrase it. They deliver a presentation and replay every awkward pause. They publish something and notice the typo 2 seconds later. This isn't attention to detail. This is hypervigilance to imperfection. Their brain is wired to spot problems, which is useful for quality, but exhausting for completion. Nothing ever feels done because there's always a way to make it better. And because they see all the ways it could be better, they assume everyone else sees them too. So they live in fear that their work will be judged by the standard they're judging it by, not realizing that most people don't look that closely. They compare themselves to experts. They look at masters in their field and measure their progress against people with decades of experience. Naturally, they fall short. A junior designer compares their work to someone who's been doing it for 20 years and feels inadequate. A new writer reads published authors and thinks they'll never be that good. They're comparing their chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20 and wondering why they're behind. This is irrational, but it feels rational in the moment. Expertise looks effortless from the outside. You don't see the decades of practice, the failures, the learning curve. You just see the result. And when you're starting out, your result doesn't match that, so you assume you're not talented enough. When really, you're just not there yet. But not there yet feels the same as not good enough when you're doubting yourself. They underestimate their progress. Looking back, they don't see growth. They see all the things they still don't know instead of how far they've come. Someone points out how much they've improved and they brush it off. I still have so much to learn. I'm nowhere near where I want to be. This is true. There's always more to learn. But it's also incomplete. They're dismissing the journey they've already made, the skills they've built, the knowledge they've gained. Progress is invisible when you're focused on the destination. Every step forward is immediately replaced by a new goal, so you never stop to appreciate where you are. This is motivating in one sense. It keeps you striving, but it's also demoralizing. If you never acknowledge progress, achievement loses meaning. You're running a race with no finish line, and every mile feels like you're still at the start. They focus on what's missing, not what's done. A project can be 95% excellent, but they'll obsess over the 5% that's not perfect. They finish a presentation, and instead of feeling proud, they're thinking about the slide that didn't flow well. They complete a report, and they're fixating on the section that felt rushed. This is loss aversion. The brain weights negative information more heavily than positive, but for intelligent people, it's amplified. They see potential so clearly that reality feels disappointing. What exists is measured against what could exist, and it always falls short. This robs them of satisfaction. It makes completion feel hollow. They're so focused on the gap between actual and ideal that they can't enjoy what they've accomplished. Every success is tainted by what it's not. They redo work others would submit. The first draft is good enough for most people. For them, it's just the starting point. They write something, read it back, and think this isn't right. So they rewrite. Then they rewrite again and again. What would take someone else an hour takes them 4 hours because they're not aiming for functional. They're aiming for excellent. This produces high-quality work. It also produces exhaustion. They're spending energy on improvements that most people won't notice. Diminishing returns set in, but they don't care. Good isn't good enough. Very good isn't good enough. It has to be the best they can possibly make it, even if that means sacrificing time, sleep, and sanity. And when they finally submit it, they still see flaws. So the extra effort doesn't even result in satisfaction, just different regrets. They feel their success is accidental. When things go well, they attribute it to luck, timing, or help from others, not their own ability. They get promoted and they think right place, right time. They win an award and they think the competition must have been weak. They succeed at something and they think I just got lucky. This is external attribution. Successes are explained by outside factors. Failures are explained by internal factors. I succeeded because of luck. I failed because I'm not good enough. This pattern protects the ego from failure, but also prevents you from internalizing success. You never build confidence because you never take credit. And over time, this creates a warped self-image where you're responsible for everything bad and nothing good. Your abilities become invisible to you, even as they're obvious to everyone else. They raise their own standards constantly. As soon as they reach a goal, the bar moves. Growth feels like proof they weren't good enough before. They achieve something they've been working toward, and instead of celebrating, they think, okay, what's next? The satisfaction lasts maybe a day before the new target appears. This is the hedonic treadmill applied to achievement. Each success is the new baseline. What used to feel impressive now feels normal. So they need bigger wins to feel the same sense of accomplishment. But bigger wins require more effort, more stress, more sacrifice. And when they achieve those, the bar moves again. It's exhausting. It's unsustainable. But they can't stop because stopping feels like settling. So they keep raising the standard, keep pushing themselves, keep moving the target. And they wonder why they never feel successful when success is redefined every time they reach it. They fear public evaluation. Putting work into the world feels vulnerable. Criticism confirms their doubts and praise feels undeserved. When they share something publicly, there's a moment of panic. What will people think? What if they hate it? What if someone points out a flaw I missed? The anticipation is worse than the reality. But even positive feedback doesn't help. Someone says, this is great, and they think they're just being nice. Someone says, I loved this, and they think they probably didn't look carefully. Praise gets filtered through doubt and comes out meaningless, but criticism lands with full force. One negative comment outweighs 10 positive ones, because the negative confirms what they already believe, that the work isn't good enough, that they're not good enough. Public evaluation becomes a lose-lose. Good feedback doesn't stick. Bad feedback reinforces doubt. They doubt praise immediately. They're just being nice. They didn't look closely enough. Compliments get explained away instead of accepted. Someone praises their work, and their first instinct is to find the flaw in the compliment. Maybe that person has low standards. Maybe they're biased because we're friends. Maybe they feel obligated to say something positive. The intelligent mind is excellent at finding alternative explanations. And when it comes to praise, those alternatives are always less flattering than taking the compliment at face value. This isn't humility. This is self-sabotage. They're protecting themselves from disappointment by never fully believing good things about themselves. If they don't accept the praise, they can't be hurt when it's taken away. But this also means they never build genuine confidence. Every compliment is deflected. Every achievement is minimized. And they stay stuck in doubt, even as evidence of their competence piles up around them. Chapter 5. How they see themselves. Finally, let's talk about self-perception, because this is where the disconnect lives. This is where intelligence and doubt collide to create a version of yourself that doesn't match reality. They believe intelligence should feel effortless. Because thinking comes naturally to them, they assume real intelligence would feel even easier. Struggle means failure. They see someone solve a problem quickly and think, that's what smart looks like. They don't see the person's background, their prior knowledge, the fact that this particular problem plays to their strengths. They just see the ease. And when they themselves struggle with something, it feels like proof they're not in that category. But struggle is how learning happens. Difficulty is where growth lives. Easy tasks don't make you smarter. They just make you comfortable. The things worth doing are hard. But when you believe intelligence should be effortless, every challenge becomes evidence that you're not smart enough. You're measuring yourself against an impossible standard and wondering why you don't measure up. They mistake struggle for lack of ability. When something is hard, they think it means they're not smart enough, not that the task is challenging. They're working on a problem, hitting obstacles, and instead of thinking, this is difficult, they think I'm not capable. The difficulty of the task gets internalized as a personal failing. If they were smarter, it would be easier. If they were talented, it would flow. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how skill development works. Confusion is part of the process. Frustration is part of the process. Not knowing is how you get to knowing. But they skip over this and go straight to self-judgment. They watch other people struggle and think that's normal. But when they struggle, it's evidence. This double standard is exhausting. They're holding themselves to a version of intelligence that doesn't exist, where everything comes easily and nothing requires effort. They don't see themselves as smart people. That label feels foreign. Smart people are others, the confident ones, the ones who always have answers. There's a mental image of what intelligence looks like and they don't match it. Smart people are assertive, they're certain, they're quick, they're polished. And when you're uncertain, slow, and full of doubt, you disqualify yourself. But that image is wrong. Intelligence isn't a personality type. It's not confidence, it's not speed. It's depth of processing, pattern recognition, ability to learn, capacity for complex thought, all of which they have. But because they don't fit the stereotype, they assume they're not part of the group. They're spectators watching smart people from the outside, not realizing they're already in the room. The label feels like it belongs to someone else, someone who deserves it more, someone who feels smart, not them. They assume intelligence looks confident. Because they feel uncertain, they think intelligence must be loud and sure. Doubt disqualifies them in their own mind. They watch people speak with authority and think, that's intelligence. They see people make bold claims and think, that's what it looks like to know things. But confidence is a performance. It's a choice to project certainty regardless of internal state. Some people are confident because they're knowledgeable. Others are confident because they don't know enough to doubt themselves. The intelligent person can't tell the difference from the outside. So they assume all confidence is earned, and their own uncertainty is proof they haven't earned it. What they don't realize is that the most intelligent people often doubt themselves the most. Not because they're less capable, but because they're more aware of complexity. Confidence and competence don't always correlate. Sometimes they're inversely related. They feel ordinary despite extraordinary thinking. Their depth, curiosity, and awareness feel normal because it's all they've known. They don't realize it's rare. Everyone lives inside their own head, so you assume your experience is universal. The way you think, the way you process, the way you see the world, all feels baseline. You don't have access to other people's internal experience, so you assume it's similar to yours. But it's not. Most people don't analyze conversations for hours afterward. Most people don't see 10 explanations for every event. Most people don't struggle with certainty the way you do. Your normal is actually unusual. Your baseline is actually elevated. But you have no reference point for this. So you feel ordinary while doing extraordinary thinking. And when people call you smart, it doesn't compute. Because from your perspective, you're just being you, and being you feels like nothing special. They normalize their own depth. The way they analyze, question, and understand feels basic to them. They think everyone thinks this way. When they're processing information, making connections, seeing patterns, it feels like standard human functioning. It doesn't feel like a skill. It feels like existing. So when someone points out their insight, they're genuinely confused. Isn't this obvious? No, it's not. But they can't see that because they're inside the experience. It's like asking a fish what water feels like. It's so constant, so present, so normal that it becomes invisible. Their intelligence is the water they swim in. And because they've never known anything else, they assume everyone else is swimming too. They don't realize that what they're doing is remarkable because remarkable feels regular when it's your everyday experience. The extraordinary becomes ordinary through repetition and familiarity. They see others as more capable. Comparison is constant. Everyone else seems more put together, more knowledgeable, more deserving. They look around and see people succeeding, speaking confidently, moving through the world with apparent ease. And they think I'm not like them. They're comparing their internal experience to everyone else's external presentation. They feel the mess inside themselves, the doubt, the confusion, the uncertainty, and they see the polished outside of others. The confidence, the competence, the control. What they don't see is that those people feel messy inside too. Everyone is presenting a version of themselves. Everyone is hiding doubt. But you only see your own, so you assume you're uniquely flawed. This makes everyone else look more capable by comparison. and you feel like you're falling behind in a race where everyone else got a head start. They doubt their intuition. Even when their gut is right, they second-guess it. Instinct feels unreliable compared to evidence. They have a feeling about something, a sense that this is the right choice or that something is off. But they don't trust it. They need data. They need logic. They need proof. Intuition feels too vague, too subjective, too risky, so they ignore it and look for rational justification. Sometimes the rational answer aligns with their gut. Sometimes it doesn't. And when their intuition was right and they ignored it, they feel frustrated. I knew that. Why didn't I trust myself? But the next time, they still don't. Because trusting yourself requires confidence they don't have. Intuition is pattern recognition happening below conscious awareness. It's your brain processing information faster than you can articulate. For intelligent people, intuition is often accurate because they've absorbed more patterns. But they've learned not to trust themselves, so they dismiss the very instinct that could guide them. They feel smarter in private than in public. Alone, their thoughts flow clearly. Around others, doubt creeps in and they question everything. When there's no audience, there's no judgment, no risk of being wrong, no pressure to perform, so their intelligence has room to breathe. They think clearly. They make connections. They understand things deeply. But the moment someone else is involved, something shifts. The internal editor activates. The self-consciousness appears. Every thought gets filtered through, is this smart enough? Is this right? Will they think I'm stupid? And the clarity disappears. It's not that they get dumber in public. It's that they get anxious. The intelligence is still there. It's just trapped behind self-doubt. So they save their best thinking for when they're alone and then wonder why they can't access it when it matters most. The answer is safety. Intelligence needs safety to fully express itself, and they don't feel safe being smart in front of others. They don't realize self-doubt is intelligence at work. The very thing that makes them feel inadequate, the constant questioning and awareness, is proof of a mind that thinks deeply. Self-doubt isn't the opposite of intelligence. Often, it's a symptom of it. The more you know you don't know. The deeper you think, the more complexity you see. The more variables you consider, the harder certainty becomes. Doubt is what happens when your brain is doing its job well. It's pattern recognition identifying gaps. It's critical thinking applied to your own ideas. It's intellectual honesty refusing to oversimplify. These are features, not bugs, but they feel like bugs because the world rewards confidence. So you pathologize the very thing that makes you intelligent. You try to fix what isn't broken. You wish you could think less when thinking more is your strength. The doubt isn't proof you're not smart. It's proof that you are. You just can't see it because you're too busy doubting. Closing. If you doubt yourself, it doesn't mean you're unintelligent. It often means your mind sees complexity where others see simplicity. And that is intelligence. The people who never question themselves aren't smarter. They're just less aware of what they don't know. The people who feel certain aren't more capable. They're just less attuned to nuance. The people who seem confident aren't necessarily right. They're just comfortable being wrong. You doubt yourself because you think deeply, because you see multiple perspectives, because you understand that most things are more complicated than they appear. This is a gift, even when it feels like a curse. The world needs people who question, who think carefully before speaking, who see the flaws in systems, who change their minds when presented with new information, who stay humble even as they grow. Your doubt isn't weakness. It's wisdom in disguise. It's your intelligence protecting you from arrogance, from oversimplification, from the trap of thinking you know more than you do. So the next time you question yourself, remember this. The fact that you're questioning is proof you're paying attention. And paying attention is the first requirement of intelligence. You're not behind. You're not inadequate. You're not fooling anyone. You're exactly what intelligence looks like when it's honest with itself. And that's something to be proud of, even if you doubt that too.